My name is Benjamin Dunn. I am 68 years old. 2 weeks ago, I had a heart attack severe enough that my cardiologist called my daughter to tell her I might not survive the night. She told him she was busy celebrating her husband's birthday and would try to visit sometime that week if her schedule allowed. I did not confront her. I did not cry into a phone. I simply waited until I was discharged, called my bank, and began quietly undoing every financial arrangement I had ever built around her. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 23 years to a kitchen table covered in acceptance letters and a daughter I would have given anything for. I spent 30 years as an engineer in Chicago, the kind of man who kept mental load calculations on everything, including the people I loved. My daughter Agnes stood in my kitchen 23 years ago with her Northwestern acceptance letter spread across the table, eyes bright with a future I had helped her build one application at a time. $40,000 in tuition. I worked 60-hour weeks for 4 straight years, weekends at the consulting firm, holidays spent hunched over blueprints until my back ached and my hands trembled from exhaustion. Agnes graduated magna cum laude, and I sat in that auditorium prouder than I had ever been of anything in my life. Then came Martin Harper, a smooth-talking entrepreneur with big dreams and bigger debts. I did not trust him from the first handshake, but Agnes wanted her fairy wedding, and $15,000 later I had emptied my vacation fund and borrowed against my own pension to give it to her. The marriage separated, reconciled, separated again, and through every cycle I was there with my checkbook, a down payment here, a bankrupt restaurant there, an emergency loan when she lost her job, over $100,000 across the years, quietly tallied the way an engineer tracks a structure's load, never once mentioned out loud. The heart attack came on a Monday I barely remember, and I woke in Northwestern Memorial's intensive care unit connected to machines I once only studied in blueprints. My cardiologist, Dr. Ellis, sat beside my bed that first evening and told me gently that he had called Agnes when my situation was critical, when the hospital genuinely believed I might not make it through the night. She said she was busy. He told me it was her husband's birthday, and she could not leave the party even when he explained the severity. Even when he told her I was asking for her, she said she would try to visit sometime that week if her schedule permitted. I lay there staring at Chicago's lights through my window, each one representing a family where a daughter would have already been in the room. That is the exact phrase people use once they have decided your dying is an inconvenience to schedule around down the hall. An elderly man named Harold told me his own son had emptied his savings account while he recovered, sending only a wilted flower arrangement with an apology card. A woman named Eleanor told me her daughter had refused to take time off work for a surgery after 30 years of raising her. We were, all 3 of us, a generation of parents who had given everything and discovered too late that our children had learned only to take. That afternoon I made my first phone call to Chase Bank, asking what it would take to revoke the power of attorney I had granted Agnes 2 years earlier during a bout of pneumonia. At the time it had seemed practical. Now it felt like I had handed her a loaded weapon. I would need to appear in person with documentation and file formal revocation papers. A 24-hour process once submitted. I called a notary office the following week about modifying my will. Illinois law required my physical presence with 2 witnesses, and given my recent health, a letter from my physician confirming mental competency, Dr. Ellis, would provide that without question. Agnes called once that week. A brief obligatory conversation asking about my condition with the enthusiasm someone reserves for discussing the weather, mentioning she and Martin were too busy with his new venture to visit, yet try to visit once you're home and settled, she said. As though seeing her recovering father were an appointment she might reschedule, I hung up, already knowing exactly what I intended to do, and exactly how quietly I intended to do it. I wish this had gone differently. I wish my daughter had been the kind of woman who dropped everything the moment a doctor told her I might not survive the night, instead of one who weighed my life against a birthday party and chose the party. Art wishes do not undo 23 years of a pattern I had quietly funded without ever naming it out loud. The truth does. Dr. Ellis, on the day of my discharge, told me he hoped I would consider forgiveness, that holding on to anger was not good for my heart. I told him honestly that anger was not what I was holding onto. It was clarity. I sat by that hospital window my last night inside, watching the skyline, and let myself feel the full weight of what I had spent decades refusing to see clearly. That generosity without any accountability eventually stops being recognized as love at all. I did not confront Agnes. I did not call to accuse her. I simply gathered every document I would need. The original power of attorney, my photo identification, the revocation forms, and waited for the morning I would be discharged to put all of it into motion. The night before my discharge, I sat alone in my hospital room reviewing everything one final time. The bank's exact requirements, the notary's competency letter process, the will modifications I intended to file within the same week. Dr. Ellis had already agreed to provide the physician's letter confirming I was fully competent to make these decisions. Just before midnight, I confirmed with myself the full sequence. Bank first for the power of attorney revocation, notary second for the will. 12:03 in the morning. I am 68 years old. I am, for the first time in 23 years, no longer the man who funds a life without asking anything in return. Across the city, Agnes was almost certainly still living comfortably in the Lincoln Park condo I had helped her afford, confident that whatever near miss I had survived would simply resolve itself the way it always had before, with her father quietly absorbing the cost. The morning of my discharge, I went directly to the downtown Chase branch and signed the revocation papers in the presence of a bank officer, removing Onnes's access to every account she had controlled for 2 years. Within days, I met with the notary and Dr. Ellis's competency letter in hand to formally revise my will. Agnes burst into my house in a panic once the bank notified her the power of attorney had been revoked, asking what was happening, why her access had been cut off. Without warning, I told her plainly that a man who nearly died alone while his daughter attended a birthday party no longer needed her permission to manage his own life. She looked at me the way she always had, expecting the father who forgave every inconvenience without consequence. I was not that man anymore. I had not been since the moment Dr. Ellis told me what she said when he called. I spent 30 years as an engineer learning that every structure needs a foundation strong enough to bear its actual load, not the load you wish it could bear. I always thought that principle applied only to bridges and buildings. I understand now it applies just as precisely to the people you spend a lifetime supporting. Agnes and Martin, from what I understand, have had to significantly adjust their lifestyle. Since the accounts closed, Dr. Ellis still checks in with me occasionally, genuinely invested in more than just my heart's recovery for me. I have revised my will, reclaimed my accounts, and discovered a kind of clarity I did not expect to find this late in life. I think about that hospital window every time I look out over the Chicago skyline now, and I think, the people who truly love you show up before you have to ask them to. If you have ever had to learn the hard way exactly who shows up when it matters most. I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments, and if this one moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There is more where this came from.